Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode aimed to be a world champion in life with Tom Maley. We talk about the gift of having amazing role models, how you've got to be thick-skinned as art is so subjective, and if people don't like you, doesn't matter how good your work is, they'll not buy it from you.
Tom was born in Northumberland in 1962, the fourth of 5 children. He is a designer, artist and sculptor. He originally trained as a design engineer, making the switch to full-time artist in 2000 with the unveiling of his first public commission, a statue of Wilf Mannion at Middlesbrough Football Club's Riverside Stadium. Since then, Tom has carried out several commissioned landmark sculptures, as well as his own pop art pieces. This includes working for the likes of Newcastle United Football Club, Newcastle City Council, Welbeck Estates and Formula 1. Tom is also involved in the production Icarus Rising, a short drama. Tom's iconic pop art sculpture Icarus features in the film.
So Tom, we're just outside of Morpeth. Is this where you've grown up?
Well, I grew up not far from here, a little place called Stakeford, between Bedlington and Ashington. I grew up, both parents are from County Durham. My dad moved the family up here when he got a job at what was then Linemouth Colliery, later became Linemouth Ellington Combine. And then, I grew up we moved here at the beginning of 1963. I was born in 62, so my mother still lives in that house, and my dad died in 2005. But it wasn't a bad little place to grow up. I'm the fourth of 5 children. My parents had 5 of us in 8 years, so that was pretty good going. Yeah.
Boys, girls?
3 boys, 2 girls. Yeah.
Handful.
Yeah, but we're mentioning my dad. He was a great fella, and I suppose growing up, I just assumed that everyone had a great dad and mother, like I did. It's not till you get a little bit older that you realise how lucky you are to have one good, never mind one good parent, but 2 great parents. But without any disrespect to my mother, my father was the driving force behind his children, and he fired our ambitions and basically told us we could be anything we want to be, and we could be world champion at that if we really, really wanted to be. So for a lot of years, I wanted to be the heavyweight champion of the world, because Muhammad Ali was my hero. But as you're growing up, I'm starting to realise I'm not quite making 6'3", and I'm not quite going to be a heavyweight. I'm lucky to make welterweight, let alone heavyweight. But yeah, that was the kind of dad we had, and he was so enthusiastic. He just he lived for his kids, as did my mother, and they were that old-fashioned, quintessential working class Durham coal miners, then Northumbrian coal miners who did everything for their children, and that's exactly what he did. So he encouraged us all to try sport. We're all sporty. He was interested in art, music. Interestingly, because Patrick, my dad, he never really knew his father. His father died when he was very young. Where he got all these ideas from, I'm not quite sure. But he did. He had them in abundance, and he just sucked culture in, and he wanted his children to be as culturally aware and to try as many different things as we could. So, he would send us for piano lessons and things like that. And my 2 sisters both learnt the piano, and he tried to get me to go for piano lessons, but football took over, and. He was an amazing driving force from that point of view, and he fired you up, and he had such great belief in his children. I was just daft enough to believe the things he told me. Yeah, you can be world champion at this, you can. So everything I've ever tried in my life, I've wanted to be world champion at, I've never succeeded, but I don't think it's a bad ambition to have. Never you can't aim too high. He was ridiculously optimistic, but in a good way. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's quite enlightened, isn't it? It's to think that someone's been such a positive influence, but with such an open mind for what's quite a traditional background, but to have a really wide view of the world, the cultures, the arts, and all that kind of thing.
He did, yeah. It's one question, if I could go back and ask him, is where he got all these ideas from, because I didn't have them as a young man, or and where he got them all from, I don't know. Maybe there was a big influence in his life, but I don't know who that was. And his early life is quite a mystery. It's a mystery, really, But I was also, as I mentioned to you, my elder brother Peter, who passed away in 2014, the end of 2014. He was the heroic big brother that every kid dreams of having. And I think this often goes with first children as well. He was incredibly responsible. He was almost as if he acknowledged the responsibility he had, as an example to his four younger siblings. But he just was a naturally gifted lad as well. He was academically brilliant. He was the school champion at 200 metres, 400 metres, 800 metres, and he could paint brilliantly. He was too much, really, exactly. And I was happy to walk in his shadow. I was 5 years younger than him, and it was great having this amazing, heroic elder brother who was a genuinely likeable guy who everyone liked. And so again, I had this target that I would try and achieve, whether I was trying to run as fast as him, be as good at sport as he was, but the art was probably the one that he really is more responsible than anybody, because he could draw. He could draw. He was the best artist in the school, and he could draw. And so I would copy his drawings, and then later I would copy his paintings. And we both shared interests in comics and things like that, and as well as the drawings of the great masters. So I could be copying a drawing of the Hulk one minute, and then the next minute trying to draw something by Leonardo. It would depend on what Peter was drawing at the time. So I was just his kid. I was his little shadow. So having this older brother was a great, stroke of luck. And I guess that sets the template for how you're growing up after that. Whilst Peter was very academic and went into academia, I was more on the technical side of things, and I tended to follow my technical interests as a career, whilst still always being interested in art. And then the art came back to me in my mid-20s, really, after a short period of probably running around trying to be a rock star and playing drums in a rock and roll band, and then taking up squash when I became disillusioned with football, and again, every time I was going to be world champion. I was going to be world champion, but you modify your targets as you go along. But I've had a go at quite a few different things. The sculpture seems to be where I'm settled at now.
So was there obviously you've done lots of different things, drawing, painting. How have you did you naturally just get into sculpture? Was that something else you tried, or was there a journey before you kind of really realised?
Well, Dad was interested in sculpture, and he himself went from being an engineer to he went to teachers training college when he was 40. So there he was, 40-year-old with 5 kids, and he said, I'm not going down the pit anymore. And he had a very understanding wife, and somehow he managed to go to teachers training college for 2 years and became a teacher, and he taught art and craft, and all this time he was encouraging me to try different art and sculpture, slate carving and stone carving and things like that. So he'd done the groundwork and got my interest in sculpture. But then I got into engineering. Really, I was either going to go to art college or study engineering, and I was lucky enough to get an apprenticeship with a local company, and I got a 5-year apprenticeship as a mechanical technician was the title. And after I served my time, I went contracting as a mechanical engineer, draftsman, and did that. Most disciplines of mechanical engineering, one form or another, I've had a go at until I changed careers. But the second career that came along, the sculpture, was just a hobby that got out of control. It was a serious hobby. Where I was telling people it was my hobby, it wasn't really. I was really interested in this pretty seriously.
Trying to be the world champion.
Yeah, I was trying to be world champion again. Yeah, and so in my spare time, I was married by this time, and in my spare time, evenings and weekends, I was just teaching myself how to sculpt. And it's amazing what you can do if you've got an understanding wife, and if you don't watch television, you don't take holidays, and you spend any free money you've got on fueling your new hobby. So I spent a lot of hours. That was my own apprenticeship, if you like. It's not the best way to do it, but it is a way to do it. Yeah. And if you really want to do it, you'll do it. You'll
figure a way out.
You'll get in. You get in from work, have something to eat, and don't sit down. Just go and get on with it. And don't stop till you go to bed. And that's how. And when you're younger and you're full of ambition and you've got energy. It wasn't hard work. It was great fun. So as I mentioned earlier, the project that got me full time, if you like, into sculpture was another local hero. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but I seem to have a collection of local heroes now. But the first local hero that I identified with and who I tried to produce in one form or another was the local legend Jackie Milburn. And Jackie's an Ashington lad, played for Newcastle, England, and he's within the Newcastle United aficionados. He's second to Shearer. He's better known than anyone. But I got involved with it because after he died, there was a statue of him went up in 1991 on Northumberland Street. And I was just learning how to sculpt back then, or I was somewhere along the line, but I was still just a textbook in hand. And then there was another statue of him went up in Ashington, and that was the one I got a little bit involved in, and I fancied my chances with that project, but I didn't get it for good reason. I didn't have the CV and I didn't have the portfolio, so I decided there and then, after the statue went elsewhere, I was going to do my own version of it anyway. And it was the one time my dad disagreed with me and just said, "You're wasting your time, son. It's gone. Forget it." But I didn't listen to him, and for once I'm pleased I didn't listen to him, because I ended up doing this big statue of my own that I financed and made in fiberglass, and it coincided in 1996 with an exhibition at Woodhorn Colliery Museum, and they were having an exhibition of all the footballers who'd actually made it into the Football Association, and that had a connection with the Ashington area. And there was about 96 of these guys, 90 odd people. And there was a big exhibition at Woodhorn. This is before Woodhorn was extended as it is today. And my dad knew the guy who was organising it, a local historian. And so this guy, Mike, got in touch with me and asked if I would have the statue ready. He'd heard I was doing this. And I said, yeah, it'll be ready. So put it on display at Woodhorn. It was part of the exhibition. It was outside. It had a great summer. And then Sir John Hall, who was the then chairman at Newcastle, who's also from Ashington area, he'd been made aware of the piece. He came out, he saw it, and he invited me to put it on display outside of St James's Park, on the corner where my Bobby Robson statue stands now. So that was out of nowhere, and I've all of a sudden got this big 8-foot statue. It's not a bad statue. It's for a first off. It got a very good review, and of course this is pre-internet days. So, it's not pre-internet, but 96. It's early days, and it really became quite popular with the fans. It was there for 2 years, and it came down when the West Stand was extended, and Sir John faithfully told me it would get cast in bronze and go back up, but it never happened. So yet. But there you go. So so that statue being there from 96 to 98, in 2000, Middlesbrough Football Club contacted me when their local hero, Wilf Mannion, had died. And Wilf was the golden boy, as he was known, and the best player ever to play for Middlesbrough. And they wanted to commemorate Wilf for good reason. So I got this phone call, and I couldn't believe it. So I ended up doing this statue of Wilf, and the piece went up later on that year in 2000. And so I went from nowhere, from hobbyist, to being commissioned to do a big bronze for a major client. And so that was the start. It's gone along okay since then, but it's not a great business. The monumental sculpture business, you've got to be doing something else, really. These projects don't come along very often. So, so I'm an accidental civic sculptor, if you like. Yeah. Not really accidental. But, yeah.
You're trying to be the best, though.
Well, you can only try. There are loads of great sculptors out there, plenty much better sculptors than me. You can only do your best, and you do what you see, and you try your best. And if you get a good review, if you get 2 good reviews for every bad review, that's not bad,
Well, the thing always with art, isn't it? It's quite subjective. So
It is absolutely, yeah. It's very much so. There's no right and wrong. If you like something, you like it. If you don't, I think the only thing I would say about public work is if I don't mind if somebody walks up to me piece and said, "That's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever seen. It looks nothing like him, and that's not him. You haven't captured him." I'm happy with that, right? I'd rather they liked it, but I'd rather I'd get a reaction than somebody who walks straight past it and doesn't even look at it. Yeah. Right? That's the worst case, right? Yeah. So I'd rather have the abuse than someone just completely not even seeing it, not even walking past it. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. Any attention's good intention.
Yeah. It is, but doing public figures, it is a thankless task because you won't please everyone. It's impossible. One does one's best.
Yeah. How did that then lead on to Sir Bobby and Shearer?
Well, the Bobby Robson piece it came after. The Shearer statue came along after Alan retired in 2007, and the then chairman Freddie taken over from Sir John, and Freddie decided he would commemorate Alan's achievements with a statue, and so I went in to see, and he got in contact, and I went in to see Freddie, and I persuaded Freddie to resurrect the Jackie Milburn statue, and I would do them as a pair, and it would be Alan running, calling for the ball, with Jackie running in as he was in the original pose of the original statue, as if he was about to pass the ball to Alan, and therefore metaphorically it was the handing of the mantle of the greatest goal scorer of the 1950s to the greatest goal scorer of the modern era, which was Alan when he broke Jackie's record. Both local lads, both number 9s for Newcastle and England, and I thought it'd make a great piece that it's this interactive piece, and so the project started. But then, as fate would have it, a few months after I was just getting started with it, the club was sold, and Freddie was no longer the chairman, and so I had to start again with the new owners, and that took a while, and then they were still happy to do the project, but then things went sour when the club got relegated, and then there was the fallout between Alan and the club, and or the club and Alan, depending on whose story, they're both there. So they fell out, and the project just basically got cancelled. Well, officially it was on hold, but it was cancelled. And so the years went by, nothing happened. I was still on good terms with the club, and in that period, I was commissioned to do a bust of Sir Bobby, which was done while he was still alive, and that one is in the players' entrance of the Milburn stadium, the old Milburn entrance. And then later on, after Bobby died, I was commissioned to do the big statue that's there now. And then in 2015, Freddie got in touch, Freddie Shepherd, so we're bouncing around here from chairman to chairman. Freddie got back in touch and said he would like to finish the Shearer statue. He wasn't prepared to fund the Milburn statue for understandable reasons. It was the club's project, really. So Freddie and Bruce Shepherd recommissioned their original commission, and we finished off the Shearer statue, and that's the one that went up in 3 years now. 2016 I think it was. So I've still got the one that started it all. Jackie is still there. He's still unfinished, and maybe that's how it'll go. I don't know, but it would be nice one day. It would be nice to finish the Jackie Milburn statue, and have them as a matched pairs they were meant to be. So we'll see.
Whoever the new owner might be, if that happens.
A new owner, I would be I'll be very interested to talk to them. Yeah, hopefully they're from Ashington and they know all about the Jackie know all about the Jackie Milburn story. But
we'll get them listening to the podcast, and then
time will tell.
Tag them in when we post.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned some other projects, and you're clearly somebody who likes to keep interested in lots of things and different pies. What else are you up to?
I get typecast as a civic artist, as doing public sculptures, and which is lovely to do. But the pieces that get my juices flowing are more pop art type pieces, pieces that are part of the modern culture. Icarus, which is that piece there, he's probably one of my oldest designs. I think I designed him nearly 30 years ago when I was working as an engineer for British Alcan, and I used to sneak off. We weren't very busy at the time, and I would sneak off with a tiny little scrap sketch pad and hide myself in the toilets or wherever I wouldn't be seen, and sketch daft ideas like this. And this piece he's born out of my childhood, and he's there's a sporting element to it. He could be a sprinter. There's the engineering side to it. There's the motorsport piece to it, and then there's a certain amount of comic book hero in him, and then there's also a certain amount of classical Renaissance type features. So he's a real mix of all of my influences, and he's dynamic, and he's going on. I always saw myself as fairly dynamic when I was a kid. I was, as I said, I was interested in sport and rock and roll and whatever, and I was never still for 2 minutes. So he's me. Icarus is he represents. The story of Icarus is obviously the boy who flew too close to the sun. This is the return of Icarus. And it's a fantasy return of the man with a little bit more foresight and a bit of knowledge. He's got the crash helmet on this time, just in case. And instead of wax and feathers, he's got a proper V8 engine inside there, and he's got the eight cylinders coming out of his back. So he's ready for action. He's ready to go. So he's a fantasy revisit of an old theme.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of start with something? If for someone who's never done, I've never done sculpture. I mean, we did a bit of pottery at school. But
with a sketch.
What kind of do you start with a different? So you're starting with a sketch, obviously, but do you try something in a different kind of medium? Are you using polystyrene? Are you using wood at all?
I would start with a sketch. They're all every one of those books is a sketch pad, right? So there's literally thousands of drawings there, right? So the idea starts in your head from what you've experienced, what you've seen, and then the best way to transfer that from the visual image in your head is onto a piece of paper. The thing about sculpture is you can't be impulsive. Very, very occasionally I am impulsive, but it usually doesn't work. The best thing to do is to put a sketch in a sketchbook and then just leave it. Just leave it for days, weeks, months, sometimes years. And if you still like it in 3 months, 6 months, the longer the better. And you go back to it, then there's a chance I might then make a model. And then, so for example, that piece there is the original model that I did. It's all cracked and broken, but it's not that far off from what you've got now. So that I would make in the workshop. To build a piece, you've got to have a little bit of engineering. You're going to make a skeleton out of something substantial. I use metal. Some people use wood, and then the clay goes on that. So it's a technical operation to make the thing strong enough to stand up to the clay and the weight of plaster that you're going to put on it. So you would make a model, or the sculptors call them maquettes, which is just just French for model. And if you're happy with the model, and that's a test bed if you like, it's a 3D sketch. It's a little 3D sketch. Then you would scale it up maybe to an interim workshop type model, which would be bigger but represents the piece as it's going to be. And then from there you could go to whatever scale you're going to be. For example, that large piece that I showed you before, that becomes an engineering exercise of scaling up from a model about so big, about 3 foot, half life-size model, to what you've got out there, which is a twice life-size model. And you've just got to you use a lot of engineering, which is it's handy given that I trained as an engineer, and that's how I scaled that one up. Nowadays we have the benefit of 3D laser scanning, and we have 3D laser printing, 3D stereolithography, and all manner of 3D printing, and big pieces can be CNC machined from big styrofoam with polystyrene blocks, and you can get the rough figure done for you very, very quickly. It's expensive, but and then you can finish the piece off, and then the bronze casting foundry will do the rest. So it is a great time to be a sculptor technically because of the advances that have been made in that area. But otherwise, making sculpture hasn't changed in thousands of years. There's ultimately the pouring of bronze and the making of molds is pretty similar to what it's always been. It's a very interesting subject, but it's very difficult to get it across to people how many times you go from positive to negative, positive to negative, until you finally come out with a bronze. So I'll not bore you with that. We'll have a little picture board of how that's stood.
It's fascinating. Yes, she says somebody who was asked specifically by her art teacher at school not to take art GCSE.
You were requested not to.
Yeah. The only ever subject I got.
You're not bitter.
No, the only ever subject I got detention in was art, because
Really?
my art teacher took my pencil off me,
Right.
and started drawing himself. So I did through a little bit of a wobbly
So art wasn't for you.
Well, no, I quite enjoyed it until Mr. Plunkett ruined it.
Right. Was it because of the art you were producing, or were you too disruptive then? Now be honest.
No, it's like I've always been really autonomy is really important to me, and I'll get there as long as I can find my own way there. If somebody's very prescriptive with me, micromanaging, I think, I don't do very well. So, I'm not disruptive. I'm just stroppy.
No, it's a good thing.
No, but he kind of stopped that, I suppose, in me. So everything now is, Mummy, draw me a pig. It's like literally a stick figure pig. Horses and pigs and cows look very
pig
similar.
and an arrow.
Yeah.
An arrow, just
with
in
a
case.
farmer next to it.
Right.
Yeah, me and Pictionary, it's always hilarious. Is it a conker? No, it's a helicopter.
Very good.
Yeah, I think James is fairly creative.
Yeah, I mean, I like drawing at school. I found I could do almost. I could replicate something. I quite like drawing hands or certain objects. Painting. If you tried to then paint something on top of that, it ruined it.
I've never bothered with painting. I mean, there are just so many good painters around. It's something that I always thought I might have a go at, but I think if you can draw, you can paint. If you can draw, you can sculpt. Right? There's no doubt about it. And learning how to draw is just copy. I copied my brother. I copied comics, Da Vinci drawings, anything I could see that interested me, I would try and copy it. And then once you can copy, you can then start to think your own ideas, and it's just it becomes a rehearsal for actually creating your own images. Then
Because I suppose drawing Hulk or Spider-Man or someone is all very helpful, because the body is quite. That's it. The different muscle tones or the skeleton.
I would never underestimate the likes of the some of the great Marvel comic artists from the 50s and 60s and that were just astounding. They were, they knew art inside out. The fact that they were doing Spider-Man, the Hulk, or Conan the Barbarian didn't matter. The way they were drawing them was just it was compelling. Yeah.
Do you? So once you've made a model out, so you mentioned with sketches you'd leave a sketch to reflect on it. Would you do the same with your basic maquette?
Only if it was a commission piece, the maquette is just an interim stage to making the big piece. If it's a work of my own, I'll make models, just to see if they look as good as what the sketch implies they might, and then they might get left. There's a few, there are a few models that I've made that haven't gone into, haven't developed into anything else. So they're a good way, an inexpensive, inexpensive on your time and inexpensive on materials to produce something that'll tell you things that a sketch simply wouldn't. It's a 3D sketch, and you can think, right, that's not going to work. So I will produce, but normally if I'm at the stage where I'm producing a maquette, it's a means to an end to finish a bigger piece. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes I'll go straight into a full size piece. It's not a good idea, but it can be done. Yeah.
Who buys stuff from you?
Not many people. Yeah. I wish there were more, but obviously the football clubs and corporations and people like that I've done work for, sort of speak for themselves. But you never know where you're gonna find a client, shall we say? I was in my local pub watching a band once again, a rock and roll band in Morpeth, and I got a tap on the shoulder, and this young man said, "Are you Tom Maley?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." Yeah, and who are you? And I'm David, and David lived down the street from me when we were kids. And he's 5 years younger than me, David, and so I recognised him. And David was we were family friends. His parents, my parents, and I knew David as a boy growing up, and I hadn't seen him since he was a teenager, really. But he was a fan of Robin on the roundabout at Pegswood, my mining tribute, and he said, "Look, I've always liked seeing Robin on the roundabout. Would you be interested in producing a small, a desktop piece for it?" I said, "I'm just looking for an excuse, yeah." So, 12 months later, he's got his statue, and I made 5 of them, and this is a few years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, and I sold them by word of mouth, and so that was an example of someone liking it, seeking you out, and we're best friends now, David and I. He lives back in the area, and he's worked all over the world, and he lives back in Morpeth, and I see him most weekends. So he's my client, but we started out as friends, and we are friends. So he's also got one of those. Yeah. I just remembered. Yeah, and so I know that I've got local clients, a handful. Last year, a year and a half ago, I finally broke into the American market. In 2006, I took a huge gamble and took some sculpture over to Florida, and I was invited, and it was a big sculpture event near West Palm, and I took Icarus there and a couple of other pieces, and Icarus went down really well, and there was a lot of interest in him. There was one gentleman in particular took an interest in him, and then we swapped details and would go back and forwards, and then it would go quiet, and then I wouldn't hear from him. And then 2 years ago, he was back in touch, and I finally sold him a piece of sculpture. So it took me 12 years from meeting him to actually selling him some sculpture, and now he's got 4 pieces. So that was an overnight sensation, a 12-year overnight sensation. So I'm persistent. I just every every year I would keep in touch with him and say, I'm doing this. Are you still, you still interested? Let's keep in touch. And he's a nice fella. As one of the points I make to people is, this is one of my little sayings, is talent's overrated. Persistence is where it's at, right? And that is so true.
Yeah.
Because, you need a little bit of talent, but actually there's loads of talented people out there. Lots of people who are, magnificently talented, but you've got to persist. You've just got to persist. And even then, you might not get anywhere. But without the persistence, the talent won't be enough.
Yeah.
It just won't be enough. Yeah.
It's true. I recently closed a bit of business for my psychology practice, and that was like 3 years in the making, really.
Yeah.
So, but you just have to keep.
You do.
I mean, and
this is it. I think the older you get, the time spans are relatively shorter. So that 12 years was, I could have done with making a sale earlier than that, to be honest.
And
Freddie came back to me after 7 years. Yeah. So there was only a 7-year gestation period on that one. So I'm still working on one or two who I've sown seeds with only in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So you never know, but it's nice. It's nice. What I do enjoy about finding new clients, and you usually end up friends with them, because they like your work, and people will only buy from you not just because they like your work, they've got to like you. And I know most businesses will say that. And sculpture is just a business like anything else.
Yeah.
If people don't like you, and it doesn't matter how good your work is, they'll not buy it off you. Or if they don't trust you, they've got to trust you and like you, and then the work is actually the third most important thing.
Well, it's just that know, like, and trust thing that we're sort of, it's hammered into us in any kind of business program.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Well, I'm a likeable, trustworthy guy. You
You
see,
seem to be.
Well, I've got to say that, haven't I? Yeah.
Well, Teresa did send you our way, so
well, there you go. Yeah.
And we like her, so
Everyone likes Teresa.
We've talked about some of the other bits of work outside of some of the commissions, like you mentioned the KISS project we were chatting earlier.
Yeah.
Where do you kind of get inspiration or kind of those sparks of?
Well, the KISS that were that's $2 kissing, or two swans stood on a foot, whatever you see, or two lovers kissing, and they're symbolised by the $2 as a sign of wealth, health, and happiness. I'm fascinated by all things American. I think America is just the most amazing country for good and bad reasons, but for me, mostly good reasons, right? It's still the greatest experiment on the face of the earth as a nation. It's still a relatively young nation. They get a lot of things wrong, but they get a lot of things right. And I'm just fascinated by American culture, because most things seem to emanate from America. The American dream to me is it produces its own ideas on its own, in its own right. And they still, when you go out there, you still get that feeling of they are still pioneering. There are still people, frontiersmen, if you like, metaphorically, if not in reality. And they've got a great work ethic. There's no coincidence that they're the biggest economy in the world, and that they're the most successful country in the world, because they really go after it. They're really serious about this, and we can learn a lot from them. But I just enjoy the culture that comes out of it, the pop art culture in particular. I know there's some great British pop artists, but the majority of the pop artists are probably associated with America. So I watch their news, I watch what's coming out of America, and I try and I jot down things. It might be a word, maybe a sentence, it might be a name of someone, and then I'll try and weave something around it. But the $2 idea is I've called it the KISS. The KISS is it's a theme that artists for hundreds of years have explored. From Rodin, the great sculptor, he did the beautiful marble of the two lovers embracing. That's probably one of the most famous Kiss interpretations. There's Klimt, who's he's got the beautiful golden couple embracing, and it's just one of those themes that artists keep going back and visiting. That piece over there on the wall, which you probably can't see very well, that was an earlier version of the Kiss. So I've done 3 or 4 different pieces based on the theme of the Kiss. That one's first Kiss. This one is just the Kiss. And I was trying to come up with a catchy, a contrived acronym for KISS, because KISS in business always keep it simple, stupid, right? It's just not a great. But there you go. And so I was coming up with something like keep it stateside, which may sound very nationalistic, but it will appeal to, shall we say, conservative, traditional America, right? So I think that piece, it'll be a Marmite one. People will love it or hate it. As I would say that my left-wing friends, my arty rock and roll friends, all say, "Oh, that's nice, Tom. It's a monument." Agreed. I say, fair enough. And then my, less left-wing, more right of centre friends, if you like, would say, "That's great. That's a monument to success." And they're saying the same thing. Yeah. And I just think I think that's great, because I've had that from a lot of people now, and some people don't see anything at all. And I showed a photograph of it to a friend of mine. She's quite artistic. Well, she's a good artist, actually. She said, "Oh yeah, you've got 2 swans standing on one foot, putting the foot on." And she said it's sort of got a 1930s flapper feel about it, that kind of. It does.
It's very Reddy McIntosh, actually.
And she in a breath said everything that I was trying to weave into the piece, right? I kissed her, I gave her a hug. I said, "You've got no idea what that means to me, And then I showed other people and say, "It's $2. What is it? $2 or what?" Or some people just don't say anything. What is it? A heart? I don't know what. Oh, it's $2. Can't see it. Don't see it at all. And that's the beauty of art. And that's it will depend on a lot of things. Depending on the viewer's experience, their likes, dislikes, prejudice, bias, things like that. So there you go. You get the whole spectrum. But every now and then someone will hit it and go, and they'll just tell you exactly what it is, almost to the word of what you want them to say. And that is the most satisfying feeling in the world, because you know you're doing something right. Because it is when any artist working on their own will tell you you're ploughing a lone furrow and you've got nobody to bounce ideas off, and so I do try and get feedback, and when you get really positive feedback like that, it's priceless. It really is, yeah.
And that's the great thing about art, isn't it? You see different things. You've got total extremes of opinion. It's a bit like Angel of the North. You've got those who are like, "Oh, we love this." It's embracing everyone when they get back to the north on the A1, and there's those who think it looks like a crashed airplane. It's
iconic. You get the full spectrum. You get the full spectrum. And the thing about the Angel, when the Angel first went up, it only had about a 50-50. It had a 50% approval rating. But now I think if you ask people, the approval rating will be much, much higher. As people accept most people are resistant to change, and most people just don't want anything there. So you're up against that. And then, so once it's in there, and it's like it's always been there, you'll find the approval ratings of the Angel of the North will be sky high now, and that's because it's iconic. It evokes the Northeast now when people are driving past that, or if you've been away from the Northeast. It's a bit like when you come back into Newcastle on the train and you see the Tyne Bridge, you just get a buzz, don't you?
Yes,
I'm home. You do. It's that colour. It's the colour. Everything about it. That the patina that it's got on the paint now, the rivets, everything on it. It's just like home, And the Angel does the same. I shouldn't worry too much about my pieces, because you get a lot of stick when you put public pieces. You've got to be thick-skinned. You can't be sensitive, and you get slagged off for your work. But actually, eventually, people just accept them, and then they like them. Even the people who really, really hate the pieces, right? Eventually, they calm down, and then they just go, "It's actually not that crap after all, is it?" And then they think about the person, So if you ask, it depends who you ask. If you go to Sunderland and ask people, what do you think of the Alan Shearer statue, you'd get a 95% disapproval rate, because
We don't like Alan Shearer.
Sunderland and Newcastle, yeah, exactly, So it just depends who you ask.
Yeah, exactly. So if you had to go back to 16, 17, 18-year-old Tom, what advice would you give him? It's a tricky one, isn't it?
It's a tricky question, because in terms of life's failures, I tend to dismiss failures very quickly. I don't dwell on them. I don't sulk. I just let it happens, get on with it. So there will have been lots of things when I was 16 and 17 and 18 thinking, wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have done this, wouldn't have done that. But I tend not to have regrets, because there's nothing you can do about them. It's in the past. If I could go back, and this would be before I would have to go back to before starting my apprenticeship. If I knew what I knew now, that I was going to get into this sculpture, I would have apprenticed myself to one of the really, really big artists in the UK, because I've read about a few sculptors who've really done that, and I could have learned so much more, so much quicker. But that would be one thing I would definitely have done, and I maybe wasn't brave enough then, and I didn't fancy my chances, for the kid who was going to be maybe by that age I was starting to realise I wasn't going to be world champion. I wasn't never going to challenge for the heavyweight title, and I wasn't going to be a professional footballer, I wasn't going to be a professional squash player, and I wasn't going to play drums for the next great rock and roll band. I was still crazy ambitious, but I didn't know then that I would be so interested in sculpture, and I would have accelerated the sculpture back then when I was 16, 17, and just gone for it.
You got there in the end, though, didn't you?
Well, I'm not anywhere. I'm just chipping away. I'm learning all the time, and there are people out there whose sculpture just blows me away. I look at it and think, how on earth did they do that? It's, I see new stuff all the time, young sculptors, and I quite honestly, I couldn't compete with them in some of their disciplines. The only thing where I maybe can score a little is possibly through experience, through the lots of hats that I've worn, the lots of things I've had to go at, and I try to roll them all into an original idea, and maybe that's the only thing that might give me a fighting chance against these kids these days, because they are so good. They are so good, yeah.
No, we've just taken on an apprentice, and her IT skills are epic. Yeah, for an 18-year-old, it's just. It's like, ooh, good, love it.
I love to see it. It's not. You love to see kids, just flying.
Yeah, it's that kind of belief in themselves that's really important.
Yeah. Well, it is so much. I mean, when you're 16, 18, it's terrifying, because as a young man, I'm coming up to 18, and I can go and drink in a bar and stand next to the men, and you've got to cut it. You've got to work, and it's daunting when you're a kid, but it gets easier. So it's very rewarding when you see kids doing so well at an early age. Because I don't know where they get it from. I mean, I was just chasing around, didn't have a clue what I wanted to do really, trying all sorts of different things, maybe focusing on one thing. But I don't know. Yeah, I was trying to be. The decathlete of the arts world, the Daley. I'm showing my age here. The Daley Thompson of the Daley Thompson of the arts world. Yeah.
Well, you have to try lots of things, I suppose, until you know what you like.
I think so. Yeah. I wouldn't change it. I spent too much time on the squash court, too much time behind a drum kit, too much time on football, playing five-a-side and things like that. But I don't regret them. I mean, even though I'll probably need a new I'll need a hip operation in the next few years, because of the amount of the amount of time I've done doing those things. But no, I wouldn't change any of that. Yeah.
So we'll share some of the images of the different pieces we've talked about today. It's worth having with the podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
We'll share your website link in it as well. But if anyone's interested to get in touch, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, I mean, there's my website, tommaley.com, if they want to have a look at that. And there's contacts on there, tommaley@btinternet.com. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Yeah.
Findable.
Yes.
If anybody wants to come and see the workshop, they'd be very welcome. Give me a message, and they can come and have a look.
Wonderful.
Good stuff. Thanks for joining us. It's been fascinating.
That's a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed it.
Good.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway.
And tell everybody.